this is Marian Cowling Owen.
And this is David Owen.
And this is You Show Me Yours, the podcast where a married couple talks about the movies and TV that they loved before the first date. And today I was made to watch Black Christmas.
Yes, you were. As a sort of punishment for not picking a Christmas movie for your turn in December.
So you show me this, which isn't really about Christmas either? Like,
It's
what?
about murder on Christmas.
Not even on Christmas. What are you talking about?
Christmas. It's called Black Christmas.
Oh, is that all it takes? Okay.
I think it is actually on Christmas, or because I think it starts on Christmas Eve.
That doesn't fit with any college campus I know, but okay.
Not 100% sure.
Anyway, get into that in a second.
Black Christmas is Black Christmas. Black Christmas is, of course, the 1974 Bob Clark movie about a sorority house which is invaded by a killer, a heavy breather, and murder ensues.
Yeah. I'm kind of getting
Excuse me.
Jason Voorhees vibes because we don't really ever get a good look at him. He seems to be I don't even know what to call him, but it's polite.
So yeah, you're
developmentally disabled.
Yes, you're getting ahead of the game here, but yes, I'm only saying that because I want to start with a very specific thing because I need to get your reaction to this.
Okay.
So yes, this movie inspired a ton of movies that would come after it.
Yeah.
And we will talk about that later. But first, I asked you when this movie started if you recognized the director Bob Clark.
And I did not.
And you did not.
And now you're going to tell me that he did some wonderful child.
So he did another. So first of all, he also directed Porky's.
Okay, so the college campus is his thing. I see.
And Rhinestone with Dolly Parton and Sylvester Stallone.
I've never heard of that.
Well, Rhinestone's great. We'll have to watch that at some point.
Okay.
There's a version of this podcast where you run out of movies and I just start showing you all this crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And when that happens,
we're coming to real quick.
You'll see Rhinestone.
Yeah.
But no, Bob Clark also directed another much loved Christmas movie. Can you guess what it is?
Did he direct A Christmas Story?
He did.
Okay.
Yes.
Which honestly, you know what? We only watched like 3/4 of this year. Usually we have it on for several rotations, and I don't know why we didn't.
Yeah, I ended up watching most of it.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, it's yes, he directed A Christmas Story along with several others. Bob Clark came up in the time when guys just directed movies.
Mm-hmm.
Like it through into the 70s is when you started to get these directors that started to be a little more specialized. You had guys like Alfred Hitchcock and certain other guys who were specialized, but for the most part, directors were just these just working guys. You just needed somebody to helm a film. Almost like today we would call him a project manager. Like you just needed somebody to keep everything moving and get everything going. And it wasn't always about some artistic vision. And just make sure the cat's okay. And it he has a bunch of different movies to his name. Some just weird stuff that you wouldn't expect. He was just a competent director that directed movies. So yes, in addition to Black Christmas, he also directed A Christmas Story.
Okay. That's what we call two ends of the spectrum.
Yes.
Not two sides of the spectrum. Ha ha. Two ends.
Yes. And your reaction is underwhelming.
Because
we're going to take this again and I want you to oversell it. Oh my God. What?
What? You are kidding me.
What? You got to come up with a good, butter my biscuits.
And will slap me upside the head and call me a grape arbor. I don't know. I need my smelling salts. I do declare. Why am I getting super southern when I do this?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Black Christmas is it's given the respect it deserves in the industry, and a lot of people name drop it, rightfully so, including John Carpenter, who name drops it for inspiring Halloween some 5 or so years later. But yeah, it's it kind of perfected a lot of the stuff that you see. Like you kind of laughed when the movie opens with a POV heavy breathing shot, and I had to be like, no, you don't understand. That was innovative. Like, you remember how when people saw 300 and Snyder did the slow-mo action, and now that's totally overdone, especially by him.
Yeah.
But that was the first time you saw that. Like, that was, oh my God, that was jaw-dropping.
Yeah. Like, what is the bullet time in the Matrix? Like,
Right,
the first time it blew everybody's mind.
Exactly. But yeah, Jason Voorhees, the POV breathing camera, like, you know, this movie came, and then over the next, 7-8 years, a bunch of horror franchises spawned, some of which directly owing Black Christmas their very lives.
Also, the another similarity there is sort of an ambiguous ending.
Yes, we'll get to that. Another thing that this, while we're on the subject of things that it shares with other horror movies, Nancy's dad is in this movie. Fuller, the cop, the main cop, played Nancy's dad in Nightmare on Elm Street.
The hot cop?
Yeah, John Saxon, is that his name?
I think.
I can never remember. Saxon is his last name. Let me IMDb that for you here real quick.
Yeah.
Yes, John Saxon.
That
swarthy.
Cop was nice looking.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nancy's dad is in this.
Okay.
So
okay.
It's just another one of those things that it shares with other movies that it would go on to inspire.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's one of those rare instances where a movie inspires a new genre. And not to say that Black Christmas was the first slasher movie, but it certainly is widely credited as being one of the first. A distinction that's often given to Halloween mistakenly.
Yeah.
Which is why John Carpenter, I think, has talked openly about how much Black Christmas inspired Halloween, because he's trying to acknowledge that they were first.
I can't remember any, not that I'm an expert on horror movies in general or slasher movies specifically, but I can't remember any before this, because before this, horror was like, I don't know what, it was more creepy thriller stuff, like Rosemary's Baby
and stuff like that,
and The Shining was after this, I think.
Just horror was like, had monsters in it.
Yeah,
it wasn't like, oh, the horror is some heavy breather might kill you.
Yeah,
he might call and speak lewdly to you. And also, that's a thing to remember, that, like, because if you're under the age of like 30, 35, like, prank callers just aren't a thing that you probably experience. Like, I remember into the late 90s and even early 2000s, there was stuff like Crank Yankers and the Jerky Boys who were still doing that sort of prank call humor. But like, if you were born by, especially after the year 2000, this is a foreign concept.
Yeah. Well, and so the early in the movie, they introduced the concept of, they have this obscene caller. And I think prank calls are still a thing, but obscene calls I don't think are as much. They've sort of fallen out of fashion.
Much of a thing, but certainly obscene calls.
Because now
it's difficult to prank call someone. Yeah. But obscene calls certainly are a thing of the past.
But they've been getting these calls for a little bit, and all the women in the sorority house are standing around, and there's one phone for the whole house, which also is just a foreign concept now. And they're all listening, and the guy is really going on about, you want me to lick you this, and you're pretty pink that, and da 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 da. Yes. And the looks on their faces, I have not received calls like that, but I have received some prank phone calls that just feel really personal, and it's really unsettling.
Yeah.
Even though you can hang up and the person can't get you anymore, but you feel very alone and vulnerable. And like, this person can reach through the phone and just poke you in your most sensitive areas, by which I do not mean anything sexual. I just mean, like, it's like the person, just by calling you, knows things that you're scared of and the things you're embarrassed about, and can get you all the places. And I think that is something that women get a lot more than men.
Yeah, for sure. And thinking, like obviously this being a sorority, they act like it's not. In fact, one of the characters, Barb, says like, "Oh, this is I get twice as bad. I'm from the city or whatever.
Yeah,
I get twice as bad, on the weekend or whatever."
But the thing is, people are not supposed to be able to do that to you in your home. That's we've got this social contract of you use the phone for business purposes,
Right.
Make a doctor's appointment, call to order something, whatever, or social, and you don't use it for evil. And here they are. Like, just looking at their faces, I was like, oh God, I remember how gross that feels. You just feel dirty afterward, even though you didn't do anything. You just were there and picked up the phone, and it's ugh.
Yeah, and it's something I definitely can't even really relate to. And so yeah, for sure. But also, you can tell that they are, while they are just sort of like whatever at first, it eventually gets to even Barb, who has basically like almost been doing a little back and forth. It even gets to her eventually. And that's the point where she's talking into the phone and like giving him the business, and he's like, "I'll kill you."
Yeah.
At the end. And that I think is the thing. And I'm sure that there are hundreds of think pieces and stuff on this from as phones started to make their way into the home, about how having a phone in your home is this portal for the outside world to come in, and it can be misused. And, in the same way that now we talk about things like letting Alexa listen to you all the time. Never mind. And all these things that are always on and always watching, and you see these, this is something that I think we will never do. But all of these couples younger than us who have just normalized having interior surveillance cameras running in their house recording stuff.
No.
Like
that's
pointed
gross.
at them.
I don't.
That is so.
I don't want a doorbell camera. I definitely don't want them inside.
Yeah.
No.
But I think it's interesting how we've given away our sort of privacy chunk by chunk, even within our own home over time.
What's odd is at the same time, I hear people say things like, "Oh, no one ever better knock on my door."
Yeah, which is
That's
weird.
What, meanwhile, here we've got people knocking on the doors for, carolers, and the two people who are like, "Oh yeah, we're here with a search party."
Yeah, like a couple of Barney fights.
Just random people. Yeah.
Well, and people, and younger people don't answer their phones. They don't answer their doors. So, like it's interesting how it's shifting what we would consider an invasion of our privacy. And that, like something that at the time of this movie, the 70s and even the 80s and 90s, a phone call, something that was considered a mild intrusion, now is like, "Oh my God, I don't know this number. Why would anyone call me?"
Yeah.
From a number I don't know. This has got to be spam, or it's got to be a scam or something.
Yeah. It's not so much why would anybody call me. It's, I'm going to assume that this is not anybody, but.
Well, the younger crowd will say, like, "Why would you call me?" Like, I've literally had conversations with younger guys at work that are like, "Don't call me, text me," because why would anybody ever call me something that they could text me?
Oh, Lord, because it's okay. Well, this is where I fully embrace my old person status, and I'm like, "You're an idiot." Like, sometimes someone's going to need to call you. But what I was thinking too, so, if the phone is a portal into your home and it lets, these outside obscene callers, whatever, in, it also, like, if someone has your number at the time, they can figure out where you live and who's there, and they can find out everything.
Oh yeah.
There used to be these reference books that were publicly available. You just go to the library and look them up, and you could get them for cities across the country. And if you have the phone number, you can look up what the matching address is, because they're landlines. There's, this number goes with this address. And you can find out who else lives on the street and what their names are and what their phone numbers are. And like, you could do all this stuff. And now you can't do any of that, but there's probably other things you can do. But yeah, just having your phone number opens up all this stuff. And it's just terrifying when you think about it. But this was clearly a time when we trusted other people. I mean, at one point the girls talk about, "Oh my gosh, this is the only door that we lock. We should lock the rest of the doors." Which is funny because now, full disclosure, I was in a sorority. I lived in a sorority house for a year. We were locked up like Fort Knox.
Yeah.
everybody was like, and don't put your sorority letters on your keychain because anyone who finds it will know that you have a key to the house and they'll try to get in and blah, 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 and just like 25 years later.
You are also post Ted Bundy.
Yes.
Like, and other,
yeah.
I can't remember. There were a couple other serial killers who targeted sorority girls. So that was a sensible, what you were in college in the mid 90s.
Yeah.
So you're like 10, 15 years post Bundy.
Yeah. And there was a lot more, talk about safety from the sorority housing people than from the dorm housing people. So that may be. Yeah.
But even, even then Bundy did like, he did a sorority in one night and I think killed a bunch of girls all at once. And I think Kemper was a sorority killer too.
Bundy was in a Chi Omega house, which is what I was, what I am. Sisterhood is for a lifetime. You're never an ex Chi Omega. You're always a Chi Omega.
Solidarity.
Did you know when I die, you're supposed to send my badge back to Chi Omega headquarters? Because even though I paid, $110, whatever, in 1996, I don't own it.
I think you'd want to be buried with it, right?
I don't. I'm supposed to be buried out in the woods in a pine box, so I don't think the pin will decay. So
yeah. I'm gonna put you in the FBI body farm. Right,
that's what I have to do. Anyway, back to this.
Yeah.
This made me giggle though because I enjoyed living in the sorority house. It wasn't like this. We weren't getting sloppy drunk. Certainly our house mother was not getting sloppy drunk.
Yes.
There was no cat, any of this stuff, but it was just sort of fun to have everybody all together. Well, like I've talked about, I love the idea of living in an orphanage because built-in friends and sorority housing is kind of the same way. Mm-hmm. We also did not have parties with children where our Santas cussed and drank the whole time. Like what? It's the movie is setting up Margot Kidder. What's her name? Barb is her character's name to be. A lot of horror movies have like the virgin and the whore, and she's very much the whore.
Oh yeah. Well, and you remember this is like before that trope.
Well, yeah. Well, and the final survivor, not a virgin at all. We can tell, which is so.
The first one killed as a virgin, so where is referred to as a virgin. So as much as there is a trope. There's Phil, who is a bit nerdy. Portrayed as a bit nerdy. There's Claire, who is called a virgin,
and her father is very protective, and
Barb, who is the drunk party girl, and then Jess, who ends up being our main character, who is just sort of a little bit in between, like not opposed to partying, but watches out for Claire and tries to get the others not to take, so she's like the soft heart,
but also
not pure,
planning an abortion.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Wow. So this is 1974. So Roe was 73? And I guess this is in upstate New York. So I imagine that abortion had been legal for longer.
Yes, there.
But the way it's just sort of blasé is foreign to me because now, and for the last, 20 years, it's always this thing that the character agonizes about. And 9 times out of 10, she either changes her mind or she miscarries.
Yeah.
Or it was like a false alarm and wasn't pregnant at all. And I don't think I've talked about it on here. I have very complicated feelings about abortion. So this is not going to be I don't know what it's not going to be. It's odd to see this just discussed so forthrightly and without, she never feels guilty about it. She doesn't at the end say, oh, well, Peter's dead now, so I'm going to keep the baby. Like, this is just, and it doesn't she doesn't fall down the stairs because the killer pushed her and she loses the baby. Like, none of this is just like, boop, that's what's going to happen. Okay.
You do get the feeling that Jess has tackled the emotions of it off screen.
Yeah.
When she talks to Peter about it. Peter is a character we'll talk more about, but he is the father.
That was a little confusing because at some point she says, I wasn't even going to tell you. And I was like, but why did you? You called him and said.
Well, and and at this time, maybe it is a thing of like, it's like, I don't know what it was like to be alive in 1974. Neither one of us do.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe just post row, maybe this was a thing of like, should men even get a say in it? Is this a thing? Because it was, you know, it feels like, from what little I know about it, it was celebrated as an affirmation of women's rights. And maybe this is the Clark and the writer Roy Moore, like maybe this is their way of saying a little bit of like, hey, putting a little bit of their spin on it. Like, hey, ladies, you really should be at least telling the guy.
That's still a thing. I mean, my Instagram has been showing me clips of Sex in the City, like 5 minutes of Sex in the City at a time. And the Miranda character gets pregnant after sleeping with a guy, like an off and on again boyfriend, and she isn't going to tell him. And then she finally does, and decides not to have the abortion, et cetera, et cetera. And so they're all, then that was 99, 2000, 2001, somewhere in there. Yeah. And there was this, should I tell him? Should I not? Does he deserve to know? Like, so.
I mean, because it is a dilemma to have, right? Like, it's a woman's right, and it's her body. And, you know, this movie does a good job of just, when Peter is like, no, don't do it. She's like, no, it's going to happen. This is what's happening. You know, this is how it's going. And that's one thing that I've read maybe even seconds ago that Bob Clark was really trying to do with this movie is he was trying to steer away from objectifying these women. No nudity, no
one's
like
killed
cleavage,
in the shower.
Nobody's killed in the shower. And they're not being depicted as these like, you know, sorority objects of desire. And they're smart. You know, no one really gets killed because they're dumb.
Yeah, no one's wearing a negligee.
Right. And no one is like,
no one's a peeping Tom.
What was that noise? Like, the worst is Claire looking for her cat, you know, like kind of gets duped into her. Yeah. But it's they are shown as capable. You know, in the end, Jess doesn't need a man to save her. In fact, she kills the man that comes to save her, which we'll talk about a little bit. And I just think for 1974, like, this is they do a great job of this, and they would make a more recent remake of this in which they would, I haven't seen it, but what I've heard about it is that they tried to spin that feminism up even a few more notches to make it more of a female empowerment kind of story. At the same time, they also do some stuff with Billy, the killer, that I think a lot of people didn't like, but, you know, and I'm sure people called it woke nonsense or whatever we were calling that sort of stuff in like 2016 or 17, whenever this came out. I don't remember. So it's on the one hand, like, I can commend it for that, for sure. Like, it didn't, I remember picking this movie, and I probably haven't seen it in 20, 25 years, like really literally since I was a teenager, and thinking like, oh my God, is there like going to be a sexual assault in this? Is there going to be something, you know? And the worst it gets is the first call. And the first call is really almost the only one that is like overtly sexually explicit. And after that, it's just like weird noises and grunts and kind of a radio drama.
It's like he's doing different voices and a whole.
They never really get explained that, because I was sitting there thinking like, oh, he's doing voices. Then there are times where there's overtalk. And like, okay, well, that's not one person doing voices. So like, does he have like a tape recorder? Is he playing? Like, what is he doing? You know, is there another person there? We don't know that. That's one thing I guess we can talk about now about this movie. The killer is kept extremely vague. And I think it's incredibly effective to just be like, we don't know what is up with him. Like, he has a weird eye when you see his eye, and otherwise, you know, the movie is telegraphing Peter, Jess's baby daddy, as the killer, but he ultimately is revealed not to be.
Yeah, and although he's kind of creepy though.
Yes.
Like, so.
Oh yeah, no,
I'm not saying he deserved to get killed, but he deserved to get stabbed or something. So he's sort of shown to be, you know, what is it? He's high strung.
Yeah, he's an artist. Oh, he's an artist. Yeah, you know, and he's apparently
he destroys his piano and does all this other stuff. And
he's like, you know, he's been at this conservatory or whatever for like 10 years. He says, which means he's like 30 dating a co-ed, but
Yeah. Trying to get his PhD, I guess.
yeah.
And then it comes down to one recital, and these 3 judges are sitting there, 2 of them with
Right.
academic regalia on,
yeah.
which I don't think is a thing, but okay. And they're all stone-faced, and apparently we're given to understand that he bombs it, which I don't think is how your PhD works or whatever you're doing after 8 years of study. It doesn't come down to the one thing, but what do I know?
Yeah, and who knows? Like, he is apparently some elite level piano player because he's playing like one of those pieces that's like. And I have an uncle who's a professor who teaches music, and he went through this phase where he would bring us music he was composing, and it was the sort of stuff that you could tell, like, oh, I bet other musicians are incredibly impressed by this, but
as a normie, not so much.
I just as a layman, this is not music to me.
Yeah.
This does not fill the role that music is supposed to fill in my life.
Yeah.
But I am sure that this is experimental and cutting edge and unique, and all of these things that a PhD in composition
I'm
would
sure
be
your
doing.
talent is very visible in here to someone who knows, but not to me. Yeah, there's a lot of writing stuff like that too. Like people talk about it's very MFA, which is not always a compliment. Like you're in a writing workshop and you come up with some stuff that is just like, whoo, okay.
Yeah. But so Billy is depicted in shadows, and Billy's definitely a man.
Yeah.
He has a similar look to Peter, sort of a feathered 70s haircut, like neck length sort of bob.
He seems to come from off campus because we see him in the first scene. He's walking from out of the shadows and climbs up the trellis to get into this storage area. And I mean, like I said, the window is wide open. I mean, like, this is not, first of all, I was like, my God, the heating costs for this place.
Right.
The door to the attic is open and the window is open. Like, you're letting all this heat go right out, and you can hear the wind the whole time. So it just seems as if it's supposed to be super, super cold. They're just letting all the heat out. But so it seems like he's coming from off campus. It doesn't really feel at first like he's a student or anybody's boyfriend or anybody like that. Like he's just finding prey. Speaking of the cold weather and people's coats, can we talk about the fur coat that one of the other boyfriends is wearing?
Chris is wearing awesome fur coat.
That was phenomenal. That was like Joe Namath fur coat. That was amazing.
Yes. Oh, yeah. It was
love
amazing.
It.
Yeah. There's a clip that goes around. Now this was brown. This was a brown fur coat, but there's a clip that goes around of Dusty Rhodes wearing a fur coat, and it reminded me of that. I mean, his is like a white fur.
Yeah.
It's not stark white. It's some kind of animal that is mostly white.
Yeah.
And for some reason, when I saw it, I was like, Dusty Rhodes. But yeah, he wears an amazing fur coat, and like the fashion is great. It's 70s, obviously, like it's contemporary for the time, but yeah.
And the house is so 70s. It's all very brown.
Yes.
And there's like very dark wallpaper everywhere. And it cracked me up though. On the walls, there's all these composite pictures, which is a thing in every sorority house. You get a photo taken with every member, and usually every member is in their little oval, an individual picture. And for us, we had these black velvet drapes. It's meant to look like a strapless dress with like a V there, and everyone wears the same pearls and and so they're all up on the walls. And there's a couple of pictures that look really old, like, oh, these are our founders.
Yes.
And just, you know, like
the house is a huge and amazing.
Yeah, just the set design. It was just memory lane.
Yes. Oh yeah. No.
Although, did you notice the door? It says they're Pi Beta Sigma.
Yeah.
Pi Kappa Sigma. And then the composites and stuff inside say Pi Beta Phi.
Yeah.
Which is an actual sorority. And I looked it up. Pi Kappa Sigma was a sorority and is now defunct. So I was like, what?
Yeah, that's on the goofs list.
Yeah.
Is the door, the door has the wrong sorority on it. Yeah, but Billy, before we get away from Billy, I've heard people, speculate there are a handful of people who have zeroed in on a line where Chris, who is Claire's boyfriend, who kind of comes in, and he's a townie, he's a cutter in the town.
He's the one who's with the school bus at the beginning. That was just a random person.
That's a rando.
Okay.
Chris is the one with the fur coat.
Yeah.
And he's kind of takes charge of getting the cops to take it seriously. Cause the cops are kind of like, initially with the reports, the cops are like, another sorority girl. She's probably gone off with her boyfriend and, left her dad who was supposed to come and pick her up. And, this happens all the time. But when a townie comes in and is like, no, for real. And he knows the lieutenant and everything.
Also, like, she's not shacking up with a boyfriend because that's me.
Because, the boyfriend's here. There is a line where someone says in passing, hey, Chris, how's your brother?
Yeah.
And so that has led to people speculating that Billy is Chris's brother. The Billy character references Agnes. As much as we can gather is that from this movie, because like I said, the modern remake really fleshes out Billy's backstory with flashbacks and stuff. There is some kind of incident involving Billy and Agnes. They are potentially brother sister. There's a line, don't tell them what we did, this sort of stuff, which maybe that means that a parent was murdered. Maybe that means something else was happening. Who knows? But yeah, I've heard that, that it's Chris's brother. I've also heard it's, that Peter has a twin brother. And that's why ultimately he's saving Jess for last. But none of that I don't think is substantiated by the writer or director.
I think the lack of knowing is what makes it scarier.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And that was when you read up on this movie, one of the things you read is that the producers and the studio and stuff, they were like, we got to have a more definitive ending than this. We got to know who Billy is. There's got to be a reveal, and
got to know that everybody's safe or not.
I think one of the things was that it needs to come out that Jess is Agnes, and then he kills her at the end. On screen we see it, and he just refused. He's like, no, it works better, and I think it works great, keeping it so vague.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on record as not liking movies that don't have a clear ending, but if your goal is creepy and unsettling, this works much better. Yeah.
Now, speaking of clear endings, how do you think this movie ends? Like the end? So just to bring everybody up to speed, everybody basically gets killed except for Jess. At the end, she's running from Billy, and Peter shows up. Throughout the movie, Peter's been the red herring. And there's a point where she's like, it couldn't have been Peter because he was in the house with me when one of the calls happened. And what we've established throughout the movie is that every time the killer kills somebody, he makes a call. And so she's like, he couldn't have, but really he was off screen. He was quote unquote sleeping upstairs when the call happened. And we know it's established early in the movie that Miss Mac, who we need to talk about because she's amazing.
Yeah.
Before we stop, has a private line in her room that is, in the house. So they have, so there is a means that Peter could have called from upstairs to downstairs and that's never explicitly explored, but you can imagine that's going through Jess's head as she is chased to the basement. She's locked herself in, and here comes Peter, and he breaks in and he's like, are you okay? I'm so glad I found you. And she's got a fireplace poker. And then flash forward, the next thing we see is her passed out with Peter dead in her lap. She's killed him with the fireplace poker. Then she is, in shock. She's taken upstairs into her room in the sorority house and sedated. And then Claire's dad, who has been there the whole time, gets the vapors.
Yeah. And
the cops all have to suddenly go deal with the press who have shown up.
Yeah. Everybody leaves.
So we're left with just Claire. and do
Just Jess.
Just Jess. We do a slow pan around the house. We see Claire and Miss Mac who are upstairs. We see their dead bodies, and then we hear the breathing. We hear the unmistakable signs of Billy being still in the house.
Yeah, so he's still there, and it was not Peter.
Yes, it was.
And it's
it was
just
definitely not Peter.
Billy
even
and
though
Jess alone in this house.
They are blaming Peter.
Yeah.
Cut to the outside. Credits roll. Phone rings. What does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, we saw that he killed Barb when she was asleep.
Yeah.
So he has no qualms about killing defenseless people.
Yeah.
So,
and he makes a call every time he.
Yeah.
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 And I think this is one of those things that's not like hotly debated. Like he makes a call every time he kills somebody. He's in the house alone with Jess.
Yeah.
He definitely killed Jess.
Yeah.
Sometimes these movies that have this sort of ambiguous ending,
You can argue another way, but
yeah, I think there's no doubt.
Yeah.
She was fully sedated. He's in the house with her all alone. He has made his intentions clear.
Yeah.
Which,
even if it was clear, even if you knew, well, and I guess they thought they knew 100% that it was Peter, don't leave her alone because she's going to wake up at some point and she's going to be freaked out. Like, that's terrible practice. But
yeah, no, like the fact that they all left her alone, like, it's
dereliction of duty.
Yeah,
like,
it's a very quick sort of excuse, like, oh, the press showed up and the old man's got the papers.
And why is he? Because he doesn't know that his daughter is dead yet, because she's still up in the attic. I mean, I assume he's figuring it out, but anyway.
Yeah. So the fun characters in this movie is one of the things I wrote up there. I think that this movie it sets a lot of the standard for how things will happen in future movies, to the point that a movie that we need to see eventually on here, but I need to continue to educate you, for lack of a better word, on these sorts of horror slasher movies, because a movie that deconstructs the genre is Cabin in the Woods.
Okay, yeah, I have not seen that.
With these archetypes, and much of that got, laid down in this movie. Other movies like Texas Chainsaw Massacre would do a little bit to lay down some of those like tropey characters that you see in these movies. But the characters that get thrown in here, the way that they're written, and apparently Bob Clark rewrote some of the humor stuff, but in particular Barb and Mrs. Mack, who is the sorority, the sorority marm.
Lord,
like they are just hilarious. Like Mrs. Mack is like the actress's first name is also Marion.
Yes, yes.
She is just constantly. She has
sherry bottles.
Just
everywhere.
Hidden around, little, the pocket flask sized. And she's just got one in the back of the toilet, and she's got them in shoe boxes, and
she's got a book with a niche carved out, which was especially mwah.
Yes. And she is always taking a snort, and she's sassy and got the attitude, and it's just.
She says something about, I'm supposed to keep up these girls' morals, and clearly not doing a very good job, which was also funny because. Yeah, all the sorority houses on my campus had house mothers, but by my time, the house mothers were not expected to maintain our morals at all. It was just like, don't smoke in your rooms, you can't have pets, don't drink.
Yeah.
What do you want for dinner on Fridays? Okay, it was like staff, like they were not in charge of our morals at all. But so to just see this, like she's trying but not very hard. It was
yeah.
funny.
Oh yeah. No. And then Barb is great. Barb is drunk all the time.
Yeah.
Margot Kidder, which most people, if you know her work, you probably know her as Lois Lane from the Christopher Reeve Superman movies. But yeah, she is just constantly drinking. She's getting kids drunk during the course of the movie.
Yes, giving them, and I expected the kid to spit it out and go, "Oh no, that's awful," but he didn't. Like she's giving him a sip of her rum and coke or whatever it was.
Yeah, and is just, it's the characters are very they are very human type
Yes.
characters. Like there is a guy who's playing Santa Claus who's like somebody's boyfriend.
Yeah.
I think it's Phil's
I think
boyfriend.
you're right. Looks about 45 years old.
Oh yeah. And he's cursing in his Santa get up, and he's like, poor Santa get up. He has an afro hairstyle, and he just has the Santa hat on over top of it,
and he has a white beard on over his beard.
Yes, but then it's like one of those cotton beards that's made out of like looks like it's made out of like wool, not hair. Not even like the bad fake hair would be better than this. It's like it's almost like the one that the Grinch wears in the Grinch cartoon when he's pretending to be Santa.
He kind of looks like the fake Santa in Elf. The one that smells like beef and cheese.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, he does. But yeah, like there's just the characters in it are well written. They seem human, which is a lot for this movie, which was probably like low budget, not expected to do a lot. Certainly wasn't expected to like define a genre. No.
I think my favorite is the other detective who I don't think even has any lines.
He's just called Laughing Detective on IMDb.
But so Barb at one point has to give the desk sergeant at the police precinct
this
the
is
number.
After the day of drinking and feeding the kid alcohol and all this. She's been drinking all day.
Yes, she has to give him the number to the sorority house. And
she cracks a beer at the police station.
And this is at a time when you didn't say 933 as your phone number, like 93 translated to some letters, like Kenilworth, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So she says, oh, fellatio, blah, 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 blah. And he's like, what? Is that a new? She says, yeah, new exchange. How do you spell that? Okay. And he writes it down.
Yeah.
Then you think, okay, that's it.
Yeah,
and then 20 minutes later, he gives that to the detectives.
Yes.
and they... And the one cop just bursts out laughing, and
like it's funny because he knows already. Like you can tell that laughing cop already knows because when he hears John Saxon's character, Lieutenant Fuller, say, "I'm going to call the sorority house," he already starts laughing, and then he's looks at it and he starts to dial and he stops.
And he just laughs harder and harder.
And he just keeps going and going.
And as someone who is prone to laughing fits, some of which you all have been witness to, I was expecting him to start coughing. He did not. He has better control of his laughter than I do. And then I think he starts laughing later at something. Oh, when the guy comes in who was shot in the butt.
Yes.
And which also is just random.
Right. That's the thing about this movie. It just has these random occurrences like the thing with the Santa cursing and Barb doing the fellatio joke. Yeah. And a farmer shoots a cop in the butt with birdshot or whatever, little pellets out of a shotgun. And he comes in and he's got his pants down and his shirt's all tattered.
Yeah. So I guess that's the only nudity in the whole thing. It's a cop's butt from like 20 feet away.
Really see his butt. But yeah. And it's just, this movie's just full of little things like that, like little jokes, all the stuff with Miss Mac, who's just, just constantly producing hidden. The only thing she didn't do is pull one out of her cleavage, which would have been, like the cherry on top. It's surprisingly well made, and you can kind of see sort of Bob Clark fingerprints on it, even though this is 10 years before he'll make Christmas Story.
It has a lot of little subtle lines that you only get the humor of on the second or third watching.
Yes.
It's not quite as good as Not a Finger, but
Not a Finger.
Pretty good.
Yeah. So it's just the fun characters, fun situations.
Speaking of fun characters, so you mentioned Margot Kidder as Barb. Phyllis is played by Andrea Martin.
Yes.
From Saturday Night Live, but all better known to me as Aunt Vula in the My Big Fat Greek Wedding movies, which is great. She's not really a comedic character here.
Not exactly, no.
But she's just sort of more of a straight person, but okay.
Yeah.
And then Jess, sort of the main, our main character, is played by Olivia Hussey, who I only know as Juliet in the, what's the name? Zeffirelli Romeo and Juliet
Yeah,
from 68
Yeah,
ish.
people of our age, I don't know about you, but they showed us that in school when we read Romeo and Juliet.
The teacher fast forwarded on some stuff.
Oh, there was no fast forwarding.
Oh, we were my teacher needed to uphold our morals because we were all of 14 and
we saw it all.
Yeah, no. My dad, by the way, thought Olivia Hussey was like, mwah, like, yeah.
Yeah,
she and Annette Funicello were his faves in the 60s.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
She has a weird accent.
Well, I was listening here. She's
Italian,
kind of British, kind of German.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like, I can't place it. Like, it's distinctly European.
Yeah,
but I can't like place it. And it's not Russian. It's not, it's not that far.
Yeah. You know, though, I liked that they didn't try to explain it.
Yeah, they were
just
like, hey, guess
what? Oh, Jess, I've loved you since I met you on your exchange program, and that's why I got you to come here. It was just like, nope, she has an accent.
Be sent
whatever.
Back to Romania soon.
Yeah. But yeah, it was funny to see because all I know of Olivia Hussey is Romeo and Juliet, and then here she's doing this, and also that her last name is Hussey just amuses me.
Which is great. Yeah, which is great. Just fun characters, just a fun. It's a serious subject.
Yes,
whose co-ed's getting murdered.
Yes.
But it's done in such a respectful way.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're not exploited more than they have to be.
Yeah, there's not a lot of gore.
There's not a lot of gore.
You see dead bodies, but it's not.
Yeah. Apparently,
it's not titillating. It's not.
Yes, there's not a lot of. So apparently, they shot much more gruesome deaths.
Oh, I bet. Yeah.
And at a certain point, they just felt that the impact was more if you didn't necessarily see it. Like you see the plastic go over Claire's head, and then the next thing you see is she's clearly been suffocated.
I think you see more
in a rocking chair
of her dead body than anybody else's. Now, granted, she's the first one, so that makes more sense.
And she's kind of the icon of the movie.
Yeah,
it's on the original poster of just this woman in a rocking chair with a plastic bag over their head. You
never see the girl who's found in the park. Now, are we meant to think that Billy did that too?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It certainly gets clumped in. And I mean, he is coming from somewhere at the beginning of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be, that he's looking for a place to lay low for a minute, however much he can. Like the mental capacity of Billy is uncertain, to say the least, in this movie.
He's not a genius.
But it could just be that he is looking for somewhere. And it's made to seem like it's not that far away.
Yeah.
Because the carolers are ushered away.
Yeah.
When they like, oh, a girl was murdered in the park near here.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's totally possible. It's not explicitly said.
Yeah.
But yeah, totally possible.
Well, it seems, they've been getting these phone calls for a while. And so has he been using Mrs. Mack's phone this whole time?
Probably not. Also,
I guess there's no way for them to know where it came from. So
yeah, and again, it is hard to say. Like they could have just been getting legit, heavy breathers, and then it transformed. Because the first call that we see is overtly, explicitly sexual, and then it never is again.
Yeah.
And I would say there's some uncertainty as to whether the first call is even Billy or not.
Yeah.
Because at that point, that would only be if he had killed the girl in the park, because he calls after a kill.
Yeah.
So if he killed the girl in the park, he breaks into the house and he makes the call. How does he have the number? Who, all these questions, but has he been consistently calling them? If he has, you would think they would drop something in like, oh, this is the third murder,
Yeah.
That, and every time he kills somebody, he calls them. It's hard to say, but it's fun to speculate. In a movie like this, it leaves it open to speculation, which I think is what makes a movie like this
it's more terrifying. The process of them tracing the call.
It's amazing.
Holy smokes. Is that how they really did it at the time? Someone had to run around the phone warehouse and see what light is flashing?
Yes. So they had
my Lord.
So up until phones went to electronic circuit switching, I think it's called, there was literally a mechanism that was, when phones started, Ma Bell sat at the switchboard
Yeah.
and you called up and said, give me number 4. And she took your line and she plugged it into number 4, which was Jim's house. And then his phone rang.
Yeah.
That continued to happen just on an automated level up into the 1980s.
Yeah.
So what you're seeing are like servos that are connecting and disconnecting lines and building this bridge. So he is physically tracing the call. He's watching how the signal is moving, and he eventually finds the exchange at the other end that it's plugged into.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It's that I've been in. So as part of my job, I used to go into these data centers and stuff, and many of them are like, this is an old MCI building, and they still have the phone switch stacks in there, and it's thousands and thousands. I mean, it's everybody in the town.
He's also MCI. Talk about a name I haven't heard in a long time.
So it's just as far as the eye can see, it's just switch stacks of like the Ma Bell switchboards.
Oh my gosh.
And previously, these would have all had lines plugged into them.
Yeah.
And then, so by the end, everybody's line was just plugged in all the time.
Yeah.
And when you needed to connect to, there was a switching that happened through circuits that connected, line A to line B, and you guys had a conversation. So it was no longer a physical plugging in of anything, but at the very end, I've seen pictures of these boards where there's just thousands of slots for these, like, I mean, they look like the cords that we use here for the headphones, the 1/4 inch or whatever ports, just thousands of them, all with a wire plugged into them, and all those wires then going back to a board and all going back. Yeah, like it was in the fact that phones worked more often than not.
Yeah,
is amazing.
Kind of amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I was floored here. They have enough police staff that they can organize a missing person search right away and send someone out to talk to you about an obscene phone call and set up a trace right away. And I know they do this because the movie has to happen, but I was just like, 70s had a lot of staff to investigate every little thing, didn't they? A lot of people at the phone company just looking for something to do, must be nice.
Yeah. Before we end it, I think we can't talk about this movie without acknowledging or without bringing up the fact that it takes heavy inspiration from the babysitter getting calls. And you said what? When you realized where it was going with the calls.
Yeah. Well, because they dropped it early. They were like, oh, yeah, the house mother, she has her own line. That's not, that didn't register with me until you see it. You can infer that it's Billy, and you see him picking up a phone, and there's a picture of the McHenry sisters.
Yeah, at the very end. So, at the very end.
So then I figured it out, and I was like, oh, the call's coming from inside the house. Ah.
And the funny thing about that is that's not what that is from.
Yeah, it was like an urban legend that went around for a long time.
But what you're thinking of, the calls coming from inside the house, is from it's
When a Stranger Calls? Okay.
Which comes out 5 years after this movie.
Okay.
So despite the fact that they're both based on the same urban legend, and When a Stranger Calls is directly based on the concept coming from Black Christmas.
Okay.
When a Stranger Calls gets the nod for that.
Okay.
Because it either more well done or more, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But it gets remembered as the one that started the trope of the call coming from inside the house, when this was the movie that kind of featured it, though they are both based on the urban legend. If you're not aware of the urban legend, babysitter's getting calls.
Have you checked the children is what he says every time.
She just keeps saying, have you checked the children? She calls the cops, lock all the doors and windows, and she keeps getting the calls, and then they're like, okay, we'll trace it. And then he calls one last time, and she picks up, and it's the cops. The call's coming from inside the house. It's coming from inside the house.
Yeah.
And the children are dead or whatever.
Here's an embarrassing thing. I did not until this very moment realize that urban legend requires there to be two lines. I thought like he was somehow just like picking up the extension and somehow.
Yeah,
I don't.
Yeah. You can't.
I know how phones work. I don't know how that never occurred to me. I guess I did not take it all that seriously, even though I did a lot of babysitting.
Yeah, you cannot call yourself on a phone. If you call your own number from your phone,
you get a busy signal.
Your interchange is busy.
A busy signal, children, is something that you get when the line is engaged. There was no call waiting. There was no voicemail.
Just go straight to voicemail.
We don't.
So yeah, I think it's a fun piece of trivia that this was basically the first movie to put this on film and is inspired. The writer has said inspired by that idea. But When a Stranger Calls gets the nod as like the one that people remember. They remember it because I was even thinking like When a Stranger Calls, like that had to come out in the 50s, right? Or something. And I look and it's like 1979 and I'm like,
I think
what?
the story's been around for a long time.
Oh no. Yeah. The story's been around for probably since phones.
Well, yeah. For how long has it been a reasonable thing to have two lines at a house? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that the urban legends don't depend on
logic.
Yeah, the logic of the situation or the likelihood of this or that. You know, like, yeah, no, urban legends are just they are weird cautionary tales in some cases, and I don't know what kind of cautionary tale it would be. Don't get a babysitter.
You know,
don't answer the phone.
You know what though? Oh my gosh, I can't remember what it was. There's a podcast that I've been binging their back catalog. It's called You're Wrong About, and it's kind of like busting what you think you know about history or conventional wisdom, and they do a lot about urban legends. They talk a lot about like satanic panic and cults and like, well, everybody knows that blah, 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 or like human trafficking and all these other things. And there was an episode that I listened to in the last like month or two, which talked about how at a certain time in history, and I think it was like the 70s, the babysitter represented kind of a threat to the status quo because the babysitter lets the mother go out in the world and do her own thing. And the babysitter, usually a young teenage girl, has some agency and is making money and is in charge. And I forget all the rest of it, but and they said, so the babysitter becomes this figure in urban legends, in horror stories, et cetera, et cetera. I need to go back now and see exactly what they said. But maybe that is the lesson of like, don't invite a babysitter in because your children will be killed. Stay home and be killed along with your children. I don't know.
The message being that babysitters won't protect your children the way that you would.
Yeah.
In a situation like this, the babysitter won't know what to do. She won't be able to protect your children from the killer that is already inside your house.
Well, and that's
who's
kind of
also probably a foreigner.
Well, yeah. And that's kind of the early version of today. It's like, see this footage of someone trying to snatch a child at Walmart. Like, no, it was a young blonde child who was being taken from a shopping cart. That's not how trafficking works. They don't take children who would be noticed. But anyway, that's a whole other thing.
Yeah. But yeah, Black Christmas. What did you think about this movie?
It was not nearly as scary as I expected it to be. I don't think there was one jump scare.
Yeah, no. It does. So I think the only thing you could consider a jump scare is the Claire kill.
Yeah.
And it is. I was actually kind of startled at how modern jump scary it was because the score is playing, and then as she walks into the closet looking for the cat, it fades down to silence. And then he leaps out and grabs her. It isn't a traditional jump scare because the camera switches perspectives right before the literal jump of the killer out. So I think that robs it of any ability to actually startle you. But again, this wouldn't have been a thing that was like jump scares were. There are jump scares. There's a jump scare in 13 Ghosts from like the 50s. Yeah. Which is one of my all-time favorite jump scares. But there have been jump scares as long as there's been cinema. Really. But this one is it's close in formula to a modern jump scare, and then just sort of doesn't make it over the line.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I'd recommend this movie to anybody. It's like I said, it's been maybe 25 years since I'd watched it. So
yeah.
I was surprised at how restrained it was. There are some other movies, there's Silent Night, Deadly Night, and some other Christmas themed horror movies that do go over the top with the gruesome stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe I was kind of mixing this one in my head with those, because
But
I do remember, I remember vaguely this being more gory than it is.
Yeah, this is not very bloody. It's not Porky's. It's not.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, no
No
random
one's
nudity.
No one's getting garroted in a negligee.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's more unsettling than anything. I do think if you lived in a sorority house, there's an added layer of memory lane kind of is kind of funny. But yeah, just if you're a horror movie buff, it's probably worth it for that alone.
Yeah, just from the history of it. And I was looking at some trivia and facts and stuff. And apparently there was a movie just a year before that did officially do the first He's Calling from Inside the House.
Yeah. Okay.
So even though this one doesn't get the respect it deserves, that one, which came before, and that's I think it's a radio DJ. It's called like Severed Arm or Severed Limb or something.
Ooh.
That's a radio DJ, and he's getting calls, and it turns out they're coming from inside the station.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, I wanted to acknowledge that. But yeah, it's just, again, funny how When a Stranger Calls gets that nod, even though it had been done several times before.
Mm-hmm.
But for that alone, for just the historical significance of it, it inspired Halloween directly. It set the tone of a lot of the slasher movies. Friday the 13th completely aped the breathing first person point of view. And then of course there's a whole genre of found footage movies that have that feel with the first person, and owe a little bit to this movie. And it just the comedy that's in it, I think, is worth it. But yeah, I mean, I would recommend check it out if you haven't seen it.
So well, folks, we would love to know what you think about this. Had you seen this? Did you know the foundational role it played? Do you have memories of living in a sorority house? Do you also think that hot cop is hot? Is hot? We're not going to combine that and call him hop. That's not a thing. No. Let us know. We would love to hear from you. You can reach us in a couple different ways. Our handle is the same for everything. It's YSMY Podcast, YSMY for You Show Me Yours. You can email us at gmail.com, or you can find us on Facebook. Also on Facebook, we have links to all of our episodes. We have new episodes every other Wednesday. So 2 weeks from today, no matter when you're listening, there'll be a new episode up. Right now, if you are listening to this in late December 2023, we are posting our most popular episodes of the year. So if you missed them, check out the Facebook page and you'll find links to them. You'll be in good company with lots of other people who have loved them. And in 2 weeks, it'll be 2024, and I will be hosting. And I actually don't know what I'm going to show Dave, but we're done with Christmas.
What a way to start the year.
So yeah, sorry, I have been focusing on Christmas and not on podcast.
You
movies.
are forgiven. We are recording this the day after Christmas.
Yes, sorry. So stay tuned. It'll be a surprise. New year, new episode, surprise.
Yeah.
So until then, this has been You Show Me Yours. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye. The You Show Me Yours theme song is Uplifting Electronic Indie by Winnie the Moog from filmmusic.io.